Let's pray and let's jump in. Dear Jesus, we thank you for already visiting us and being with us this morning, God. Through praise and through worship, God, and through the honoring of our tithes and offerings, God, we just thank you for your touch within our lives, God. So right now, I submit myself, I submit my will to you, God. May I just be a living vessel, God, for your word today, God. In your precious name we pray, amen. You know, when we were young as kids, there's a classic game that we probably all have played growing up, and that game is hide and seek. Did anyone ever play that like me growing up as a kid? Well, with two other brothers, we always played hide and seek around the house. It just kind of was the quick go-to game. And as we were growing up, I was always a little bit on the chunkier and the thicker side. So I always had the hardest of time of trying to find places where to hide. Whereas my younger brother, Pastor Adam, wasn't always as big as he is today. And he was the little guy. And he would get into the smallest of spaces, whether it be the dryer or the attic, whether it be the dresser drawer or even the washer. No one could ever find where he was. You see, in the game of hide and seek, whoever hides the best and not get caught wins. That is simply the goal. But when it comes to the game of hide and seek with God, whoever hides the worst is actually the winner. That is the goal. And whoever hides the best actually loses, because you're keeping yourself away from God. We often try to hide from God, thinking we can keep things from him. Adam and Eve did this in Genesis when they disobeyed God and they ate from the tree of knowledge and good and evil. They tried to hide from God. And God came down and said to Adam, "Adam, where are you?" God knew exactly where Adam was. He couldn't hide from God no matter as much as he tried or wanted to. God wanted Adam to acknowledge that he was in hiding. And in our Christian faith, our desire should be the worst hiders that there is. Just like these kids playing hide and seek. You tell me how good they are.
No, seat behind here. One, two, three. Here it comes.
Ready or not, here I come.
I think we found Nathan. Hi, Nathan. We found you.
Ready or not, here I come. Where are you? I'm gonna find you. Where are you? Where are you hiding? The worst hider you can be. That is our goal when it comes to God. Turn with me to 2 Kings. 2 Kings in verse 5. This is where we're going to park it this morning and kind of exposit throughout this morning. And we're going to take a look at a man named Naaman and his journey of hide and seek with God. Again, 2 Kings chapter 5, if you have your Bibles, it will also be on the screens, beginning in verse 1. Naaman was the commander of the army of the king of Syria. He was a great man with his master and high in favor, because by him the Lord had given him victory over Syria. He was a mighty man of valor, but, there's a but, he was a leper. Now the Syrians on one of their raids carried off a little girl from the land of Israel, and she worked in the service of Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress one day, "Would that my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria. He would cure him of his leprosy." So Naaman went in, hearing this news, and told his master, his king, "Thus and so spoke the girl from the land of Israel." We just read that Naaman was the captain of the army. He was a Syrian general. This dude was highly respected. He was a valiant warrior. He was second in command to the king. This man was full of authority and power and position. But the Bible says, but something followed. He was a leper. He could have won all these great battles in his life, and he did. But when he would go home, he would have to face himself in the mirror to address that he still had a problem. He was a leper. He had an incurable skin disease that he could not get rid of on his own. And although it wasn't as severe as some other lepers who were actually outcasts, he still had a disease that he had to trust and believe God for a miracle for. Naaman had the position, but he also had the problem that he hid. But in this moment, Naaman was willing to do whatever he took. He did not follow God. He did not know God at all. He didn't have a relationship with God. But when he heard this news from this young girl, he had the faith to take the first step and the boldness to address his king, which was the first step of uncovering his problem. Naaman knew that if he bore his weakness before everyone and he would let it all lay out there would be nothing to go back to. Word would for sure get around that he had leprosy and that he had a problem. He risked everything for the possibility to be healed. He was not concerned with what people thought or what they gossiped about him, but by hearing what could happen, that there is a chance of a touch from God in my life and it could change it all, then I am going to be willing to stop hiding. And the goodness of God, family, within our life is that even though we try to hide, God continues to seek us in our life. And today, we are going to discover three areas that I believe we try to hide behind in our faith. Three areas that I believe God is trying to get us out from so that we can fully accept his love and his forgiveness and all the blessings that God desires for you and I in our life. Let's continue reading now in verse 5. This is after Naaman went to his master, the king. And the king of Syria told Naaman, go now, I will send a letter to the king of Israel. So he went, taking with him 10 talents of silver and 6,000 shekels of gold and 10 changes of clothing. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, when this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you Naaman, my servant, that you may cure him of his leprosy. The first area that we hide behind in our life is we hide behind effort. However, God still seeks despite our effort, eager to be healed. As he went and approached his king, the king supported him and said, Naaman, I'm actually going to send a letter on your behalf because I want you to be healed. What the king was doing is he was putting the confidence and the trust and the ability in the king of Israel. And he thought that the king of Israel was going to be the one to help Naaman. And in excitement, Naaman did what was customary during this time, and he went and gathered wealth. If I'm going there to see another king, I need to bring wealth to them, to honor them, and to give it to them. Naaman and the king both trusted the position and the power and the riches of the other king, but they did not think about God's grace in that moment. They thought that the power and the wealth would leverage the king's healings. Simply said, they thought they could buy a touch from God. Like I said, this was customary to bring wealth to another king, but this is not God's way of working in our life. God's favor in our life cannot be purchased. It is not earned in any way. It cannot be bought and it cannot be negotiated. God is so incredible to us that he does not seek after what is in our hands. He seeks after what is in our hearts. And God shows favor. God shows favor to those that desire his hand upon their life, to welcome a move of God in their life, who submit to the will of God in their life. A heart after God will surely show the hand of God within your life on display. Titus 3:5 says that not because of works done by us in righteousness, but by according to his mercy. It is only through the mercy of Jesus Christ that you and I can experience a loving relationship with him today, family. Naaman's healing was not going to be bought by any riches. And he bought or any effort that he would make to the king of Israel. And the same is so true for you and I today towards God. It is not by our wealth. It is not by our title. It is not by our works. It is not by what we do, but it is by the grace of God in Jesus and Jesus alone. You might be here today, or maybe you've said this before in your faith, that God, I gotta stop sinning so I can get right with God. Man, gosh, I gotta get my life together before I show up at that church at Easter or for Christmas. I gotta turn some things around. Gosh, God, if you do this for me, I promise I'm gonna do this. If you just do this right now for me, God, I promise I'm gonna make a change. And that's sometimes how we think, isn't it? That we so easily take out God's love and his grace that he so freely gives to us. And instead we insert what we think is, I need to do this for this. But no, family, that is not what you and I have to do. We have the opportunity of relationship with Jesus and to receive his grace simply because of our faith in him. That is all. Rather than trying to buy God's love, our focus should be to experience the fullness of his love within our life. The fullness is Jesus. Jesus carried the weight. Jesus set us free. Jesus is the source and the answer. The gift of Jesus is priceless within our life. There are some amazing artifacts that you can find around the world that are on display today. But despite how amazing they are and how wonderful they may be, these items you cannot purchase no matter how much money you have. They simply are priceless. One of these things is the Rosetta Stone that is in Great Britain. And I'm not talking about the program you could buy on Amazon to learn some Espanol. Quick history lesson. There's actually a real Rosetta Stone, and it's actually an ancient Egyptian artifact that was critical and crucial in being able for us to understand the Egyptian hieroglyphics. It dates back as far as 196 BC, and it was actually found in 1799 by Napoleon troops, French troops, and when they found it, they made this amazing discovery, but after a couple years in one of their raids, they ended up gifting it to Great Britain in 1801, and it's been in Great Britain's possession ever since. It's actually on display today, and maybe you have seen it. The thing is that over those hundreds of years, the Egyptian government has always tried to get their artifact back. That is ours. We want it. And Great Britain says, nope, not going to happen. Absolutely not. Why? Because to Great Britain, it is simply priceless. There is no way they want to give this up. And there are some things in our life that money cannot buy. There is no amount of wealth and no amount of title that can obtain it. And one of those things is God's favor and his hand within your life. Unfortunately, many believe that they have to earn God. And often it's that philosophy or view that keeps people away from ever committing to God because they think they have to earn or work for his love. So today, family, as you approach God, Do not approach him hiding behind your effort or hiding behind your works or hiding behind your own strengths or your own abilities, because let me tell you, everything that you think you have is already his, and it was him that gave it to you in the first place. Allow him to seek you right where you are with an open heart of faith. We must stop being our worst enemy. God desires to do something amazing within our life, and it is not going to come from anything that is in our hands that's going to try to buy that favor upon us. Let's continue reading now in verse number 7. This is right after now the king of Israel read the letter. And he said, and when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, am I God to kill and to make alive? That this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy. Only consider and see how he is seeking a quarrel with me. But when Elisha, the man of God, heard the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent to the king saying, why have you torn your clothes? Let that man come now to me, that he may know there is a prophet in Israel. The second area that we often hide behind is we hide behind fear. But despite our fear, God continues to seek. As the king of Israel received this news from Naaman and the king of Syria, he immediately reacted in fear, and he tore his clothes. He was frustrated and he was fearful because he knew there was no way that he was going to be able to cure this man that was before him. The king could have easily use this as an opportunity to demonstrate the power of God. But instead, the king used his own insecurities and only thought about himself in that moment. Instead of going to the man of God, the prophet Elisha, Naaman went to the king. You see, the king of Israel was royalty. He was familiar being around the king and being around royalty. He was familiar with that environment. So he went to who he thought he was okay with. But if you remember in the verse, the young servant girl never said the king of Israel was going to be able to heal Naaman. She said that there is a prophet, a man of God in Samaria named Elisha. He was running to the wrong person from the very beginning. And sometimes, so often in our life, we run to the wrong people instead of running to the one where our help comes from. If I could be real for a moment, if you are a married man struggling in your marriage, you cannot run to a friend of yours that co-signs on you having an affair or confiding in another woman. You cannot run to someone that you are desiring to co-sign on the lifestyle that you desire to live, rather than seeking someone who's going to hold you accountable, who's going to give you godly advice, who's going to hold your hand and walk with you along the way. We cannot run to people hoping that they co-sign on our problems instead of running to Jesus. We can't put our expectations on people like that as a source for something that only God can do within our life. Instead, we need to take a moment to depend and believe in the power and the goodness of God, to look past our present and our past failures and mistakes, and truly give it to Him as an opportunity to do what His Word says He will do. In this situation that we just read in the Bible, there were two people with two different responses in the face of a decision. There was the king who went into fear mode, and then there was Elisha who went into faith mode. It was never going to be the king's faith that would help Naaman. It was going to be the faith of a prophet. And when Elisha heard of the king's reactions, he stepped in and he thought that this is the perfect opportunity for me to go to this man to show him what God is able to do. The faith of Elisha allowed him to go to God on behalf of this man, a Sumerian general who he did not know or ever met in his life at all. All Elisha knew was that this man was my neighbor, and my neighbor is in pain. His neighbor had the faith to leave to come to where he desired to get his healing power. And despite how Naaman looked, and despite his disease, and despite his circumstance, Elisha, who knew God, and because he knew God, guess what? Elisha knew who he was. And Elisha stood up and led in confidence and said, let that man come to me, because you're over here acting like a fool. Let that man come to me, the prophet of God, who is going to be able to help you. Fear was not a part of Elisha's vocabulary. He was willing to look past that position, to look past that title, to see the hurt within that man's eyes. And I want to ask you this morning, family, do you know Jesus today? That you are in a place to shout, let that broken person come to me. 2 Corinthians 3 and verse 12 says, since we have such a hope, we are very bold. The hope we all have is the hope in Jesus. The message that is within all of us that we say are a Christian is that God sent his son Jesus to die for us. And that is all the reason we need to be bold within our faith today. We must be careful, family, to not walk past people that are hurting that you and I have the direct answer to. They are reaching and they are yearning and they are looking for it. And we say we have it, but sometimes we don't want to show it. We can't hide and freak out when God sends people our way that maybe don't look like us or don't act like us, that may be a little bit jacked up or a little bit messed up or a little bit off or a little bit crazy. Because let me remind you, if you're a Christian today, you once surely looked like them and you are a little bit messed up yourself. So don't think you're any better than someone standing in front of you with leprosy. Thank God someone in your life invited you to church. Thank God your grandmama prayed for you when you were growing up in the church. Thank God someone believed in you despite how ugly and messed up you were and your actions were. If you know my brother, Pastor Caleb is an amazing evangelist. That is his passion. He would rather be outside these four walls than be in the four walls. He desires to go into the community and share the message of Jesus because he knows who God is and he knows who he is. And he often goes to the places that you and I don't even want to naturally go to, like the DMV or like the state prison or the courthouse across the street. He has no problem going to these areas where people are hurting, where they look like Naaman, where they look a little bit messed up and have a past. Why? Because he knows that they are his neighbor and he desires to share Jesus with them. To be a neighbor, family, without fear is understanding that it's not about us at all. It's not about us, family. It's about Jesus. It's about this message. It's about the answer. It's about the one who is the antidote for all the problems within our life. If you call this your home church, then we have all been challenged this year to be a good neighbor. And a good neighbor is not intimidated by people's prayers, by their situation, but rather wakes up and says, God, today, send me someone so that they know there is a prophet in Rancho Cucamonga named Nathan. There is a prophet in Upland named Kenny. There is a prophet in Corona named Lester. We desire, God, to send people our way. Forget the comfort. Forget the convenience. I know the cure that you need, and I refuse to hide behind fear and allow fear to stop me from sharing Jesus with others. So today, let us choose to be like an Elisha that says, behold, let them come to me for I know the man of God. Let's continue reading in verse 9. Are you with me still? Amen. Verse 9. So Naaman came with his horses and chariots, and he stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean. But Naaman was angry, and he went away saying, behold, I thought you would surely come out to me and stand and call upon the name of the Lord and wave his hand all over the place to cure the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, way better than the waters of Israel? Could I not just go and wash in them and be clean? So he turned away in rage. But his servants came near and said to him, my father, my master, is it a great word that the prophet has spoken over you? Will you not just do it? He actually said to you, just wash and be clean. The last area that we hide behind is we often hide behind facades. However, God seeks despite the facades that we put up within our life. So there goes Naaman, excited and thrilled. Man, today's the day. These bumps, these boils, they're going away. God is going to heal me. Wait. Where's Elisha? Why are you sending a servant to come talk to me? I want Elisha. Not only do I come all this way to get my healing and to see you, but you're not going to come out. You're not going to come wave abracadabra over my life. And then you want me to go wash in the nasty, muddy Jordan River when I have way better waters where I come from. Why would I go to a place that I am unfamiliar with? Naaman was hot, to say the least. This whole time, Naaman thought he was in search of a cure for leprosy. But in actuality, he was hiding behind a facade. He expected things to be done his way. He didn't want to strip off the gleaming armor that he was used to, that he was praised in, that he was loved in, that he was respected in. Yet beneath all that armor was a man hiding behind a facade of his spiritual limitation and his inward problem that was happening in his life. Naaman had a heart problem. Naaman had a pride problem that he was willing to hide behind. He rolled up there to Elisha's house thinking he was the big man on campus. But let me tell you, family, there is no big shots in the presence of God. There is no big man in the presence of God. There is only God and God himself. You know, in our society, there are some things that you can do to enhance one's appearance. Maybe many of you ladies are familiar with this, a thing called a spank. A spank is a compression garment that's used to kind of hold things in and keep it together. Well, I ain't hating on you ladies, just listen. A couple years ago, I was shopping with my wife in LA, and we went into a Spanx store. She was looking around, and I was just on my phone minding my own business until I happened to glance up and see it said men's section. I said, men's section? I mean, it was filled with bras and underwear, so I'm like, what is this? So I go over to the men's section, and to my amazement, I find that they make men's compression garments for the thicker dudes out there like myself. My mind was blown. You see, believe it or not, I actually fit into this. Not only do I fit into this, you all think I look this good on my own, but oh no, your boy's got some help with him up here this Sunday morning. You see, this is meant to hold me in. It's meant to keep things tight, to make things a little bit smooth. This thing is to make me look a little better in my clothes and my outfit. It's to give me a little bit better confidence about myself when I wear that Spanx. See, I'm always going to keep it real with you, family, but I'm never going to keep it that real where I'm going to come up on this stage without one of them big bad boys and let the wiggle and the jiggle all hang out. So let's keep it 100 on this Sunday morning right now. I'd rather come up here and hide behind what makes me feel comfortable rather than letting it all hang out for you all to judge me and to see. And sometimes we come to God like that on a daily basis, and we hide behind different facades within our life that make us comfortable and make us feel good, or we just accept it as who we are. We hide behind the facades of pride and fear and lust and sadness and insecurity rather than being transparent to come before God and letting it all hang out and letting God come in and tear down the walls and tear down the facades that are within our life. Naaman was prideful and he was impatient. And he wanted Elisha to do what he thought Elisha would do. He wanted it his way. I don't want to go to the Jordan. I want to go to Abana and Pharpar. I'm familiar with that. And I don't know about you, but I certainly have been there before within my own life telling God what I want. But when you try to write your own prescriptions in life, to make things happen your way, it will get you nowhere but a misdiagnosis and a life of frustration as you go over and over and over again because you're refusing to go to the one who has it all. Why? Why do we think that we know and have a better solution than God and His Word? Why do we go to God with our conditions, knowing all too well that God is faithful and that His promises are real within our life and made available to you and I today? How many of you love to go out and eat and enjoy a good meal? Anybody out here? I mean, I do clearly because I have to wear one of those guys when I'm up here. So I enjoy a good meal. If you've ever eaten out before, and been to these places, I think you could tell me that there is a difference between dining at Chipotle for lunch and dining at Mastro's or Ruth Chris for dinner. Chipotle is quick. You're in and out. It's decent, average food. You don't go there to have a 3-hour lunch. You go for something quick and you leave. Your expectation is probably not that high. But when you go to Mastro's and you're about to drop $3.50 on a meal, you best believe you want the whole experience from beginning to end. I will wait for that bread and more bread and more bread. I will wait for my steak to be cooked to perfection. We do not try to take things into our own hands when we are at Mastro's or we are at Ruth Chris. A couple months ago, I was on an overnight trip with my wife and Pastor Adam and Pastor Ashley. And as we were going on this trip, we knew that there was a new breakfast spot, kind of one of those hip Instagram spots that you had to try. So we were all down and game to go to this restaurant that next morning and have breakfast. Well, me being the type A planner that I am, I already made up in my mind that if there was a long, crazy line, it was not going to happen, at least not for me. I was not going to wade into that. So the next morning, we go up the escalator, and guess what? That line is, no lie, 50, 60 people deep. There is no sandwich that is worth it to me like that. Nothing. So Pastor Adam and Ashley immediately jump into line. Like, they're excited. Their phones are out already ready to take a picture of this sandwich. Meanwhile, Sanaa starts walking over with them, and I look at her and say, "Where are you going?" She said, "I'm going in the line. We're having breakfast." I said, "No, we're not. I told you if it was a long line, we're not going." She goes, "What do you mean we're not going? I'm hungry. We're here for breakfast, Nathan." I said, "Excuse me. I do not care. I do not want to wait in that line. Let's go." And being the nice, submissive wife that she is, at least in that moment, we got in an argument. 5 minutes back and forth about a dumb sandwich and who wanted to wait in line. But guess what? Nathan won. We got in a taxi and we went over to a mall. And we start looking now for a restaurant. 10 minutes in, nothing. So I'm like, okay, God, I really need you to meet me right here, right now. Because this woman is hangry. She's looking at me with gleams, like just eyes that could penetrate my soul, Miss Donna. Like just, husbands, you may know what that looks like. The murmuring that is coming out of her mouth, I can't even describe to you. I just know that I had to find something for her to eat. And real soon, 20 minutes in, nothing. 30 minutes in, nothing. I'm not exaggerating. 40 minutes in, wandering this mall, we could not find nothing, and then we stumble upon a Starbucks. And on this beautiful vacation morning, we went to Starbucks and had a stale sandwich and an average cup of coffee. No offense to anyone that works at Starbucks here this morning. It was not ideal to me. And we sat there and we continued to argue about that. Why? Because Nathan was prideful. And no lie, 5 minutes later, Pastor Adam and Ashley showed up with pictures of the sandwich that they ate and rubbed it in my face so that I knew what my impatience missed out on. Proverbs 26:12 says, do you see a person wise in their own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for them. Pastor Kenny, in that moment, I was way more than a fool when it came to eating breakfast. And there are so many people that are missing out on the favor and the hand of God because they just want to give up. And they want things done their way. And they let pride get in the way. And they refuse to be obedient and listen to what God has already told them in their life. It's amazing to me the amount of people and believers that just accept to live in their mess and be filled with leprosy because it's familiar and it's easy and it's convenient and it's tempting, or we're lazy, rather than going through the purification process that God has for us, the refining process that God has, the cleansing process that God desires for us. Because when we are so filled with ourselves, there is no room for God to come in and be filled of Him. There's just simply no room. Thank God that Naaman, in his own flesh, wanting to give up and leave, his servants talked some sense into that man and said, please, do not walk away from what God has promised you. It's as simple as go and wash and be clean, Naaman. And in verse 14 it reads, so he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. And his flesh was restored, not just restored, but restored like that of a child. And he was clean. 7 times Naaman would go and dip in the Jordan River, naked before God and others around him. The instruction didn't make sense to him. It was odd. It was weird. It was unfamiliar. It would take some time. And the instruction of God in our lives may not make sense to us either. But just like Naaman, there is a promise that is attached to our obedience. And there's a promise attached to your obedience today, family. During a game of hide and seek, the hardest part is waiting. Waiting to be found. Waiting to be discovered. And God desires so much more in our life than coming in to heal our leprosy. He desires to do a work and heal our hearts today. We may have it all together on the outside, but God knows sometimes that we are sicker on the inside. And boy, do we need a spiritual dip in our lives. The question is, how bad do you want it today? Are you willing to get naked before God? Are you willing to come out from hiding behind the facades? A part of the waiting process is trusting the direction of God that He's leading us to. Are you willing to walk and dip into your restoration today? God has provided the roadmap to us through His Word. You and I do not have to worry, family, but it is up to us to take the first steps of obedience and wait on God. As we get ready to conclude this morning, in verse 11, we read that Naaman said in his anger, I thought that he would surely. Remember, he had his own idea. He had his own plan. He had his own expectation. But when he stopped trying to hide from God and got his pride out of the way and submitted to the plans of God, he was healed of his leprosy and his heart. And I love what it says in verse 15. Naaman said, behold, I know that there is a God in all the earth, but in Israel. His whole belief and position changed. He went from saying, I thought, and being prideful to, oh, I now know that there is a God. If he stayed prideful, he would have stayed a leper. But when we are obedient, we walk in God's blessing. And when we start declaring, I know, more often in our life, we are reiterating by faith the goodness of Jesus and his promises despite our circumstance. That although we go through the dipping process, because you and I will, because we all have a form of leprosy that not constantly needs a spiritual dip within our lives. But as we go and as we dip and we'll believe God for the healing of our bodies, and we go and believe God for the restoration of our marriage, and as we go and dip and believe God for the restoration to bring our kids back to our homes, by faith we are able to say, although I may not see a change right now, although I may not see anything yet, I choose to say, I know that God is for me. I know that God is with me. I know that he is my strength. I know that God is my helper. I know that I have peace today. I know, and I know why, because I know the one who is the answer to the cure, and his name is Jesus. That is how you and I can continue to dip 7 times and not see anything the first time, and not see anything the second time, and not see anything 5 years in or 10 years in, but there will come a 7th time, and God will reveal his miraculous power within our life and to generations to come when we are faithful and obedient. So today, my prayer is that we all come out from hiding. And my hope is that we desire to grow closer to God, that we come to a place where we are willing to be caught, willing to be found, and we stop hiding behind our efforts and our fear and our facades and begin to truly walk in the love and the forgiveness that God offers. To meet Jesus, you have to unclothe yourself. You have to come to God with an openness and a willingness. And as you do, to shame the enemy is not to allow your past and your present leprosy to keep you from the destiny and the purpose that God is calling you into. Out of all this morning, I hope you walk away with this. Naaman eventually trusted God and discovered him to be the God of miracles. I want to ask you today, do you trust and believe God to be the God of miracles in your life this Sunday morning? Can we give Jesus a shout of praise if you believe he is the God of miracles within your life?